farm tractors from early days sit in a museum. It's nice and they're pretty and clean and polished. But it's a totally different thing if you go to that same museum in a day when they start the tractors up and move them, parade them around the yards, and you can hear them run and see some oil drip off the engine and things like that. To me, a farm event with tractors that are running is much different than seeing them sit in static display. I think the airplanes are the same.
It's always been a philosophy in our family and our group is that airplanes are meant to fly and they should be kept flying.
My brother is very protective of aviation history for Canada, and a lot of the airplanes are being sold out of the country. As they get older, they're being sold to South America and they're being sold to the United States.
Was the Canso 11094 civilians, CF NJE, had an accident about 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle and 40 or 50 miles to the east of Inuvik. Had an accident.
Where it sat on the shore, it was missing about 14 feet of the one wing, and the aircraft had been sunk in 120 feet of water, but was now up on the shore. It had sat there for quite some time, but wasn't shot up or damaged by anybody on skidoos, which was really amazing after sitting there for 7 years. They had some Beach 18 skis on our farm that we had from previous life, and they repurposed them to make skids for it so that they could haul it out on this ice. And they incorporated some help from local people, which is always the case even here. But there was a native fellow that helped them get it out, and I don't think they could have done it without them. They didn't know the conditions. They don't know the north, and he brought food, and he brought tents, and he brought bigger equipment that made their trip a real success. One of the biggest technical challenges was getting it off the land without cutting trees down. Some of the trees maybe got bent over a bit, but they had to trim the wings and move stuff around and find different ways to get out of there. But that was probably the biggest challenge, is to honor the land that they took it off of.
They brought it down to Fairview and put the wing in one shop and the fuselage in another on Brian Wilson's farm.
4 or 5 very capable people in their 60s and 70s who farm for a living, can fix almost anything.
Every Wednesday night we would go down and find something to clean, something to fix, something to repair. And after a few years, some of the pieces started to go back together. And after a while, it started to look more and more like an airplane.
Why did they choose Wednesday to do it?
I don't know. They might have thrown a dart and said, is Wednesday a good day for everybody? But there was no significance to Wednesday other than convenience. But it gave them, if you want people to get together, you got to get in their schedule. So if you schedule a day, it happens. If you call up and everybody, can you come? And then nobody can come on the right day. So
they pulled it out of there when it was time to put the wings back on. And it was a big celebration when all the work they had done to repair the wing section, and there's 2 bolts that went in, and they just slid in perfectly. And that was when they knew they had a flying aircraft and they would be ready to go again. After that, it was a matter of finding engines for it.
The story of the engines is a story of cooperation between the peoples of Canada to help preserve their history. The town of Stephenville in the north end of Newfoundland had a pair of serviceable engines on a museum plane there that was never going to fly again. When our people heard of it, we got in contact with them, and they were happy to have us exchange a set of core engines that were no longer serviceable, painted up to look good. We put them behind a 20-foot trailer on a motorhome and went all the way across Canada to the northern end of Newfoundland, exchanged 2 engines, and came back. To celebrate its restoration, the Fairview Aircraft Restoration Society is taking the Canso on a cross-Canada tour. They're visiting various communities to share the plane's rich history and significance. Right now, they are in Thunder Bay. It gives them an appreciation of history.
I came up here to do the annual on the aircraft and then travel with it as maintenance to, luckily nothing more than keeping it gassed up and making sure there's enough oil in it. And I was over here last year visiting and did a couple of days work and got called up a couple of months later and asked to come back for the summer and do this. Being able to do this for an aircraft that spent its whole life serving Canada, so to be able to take it around and see it in people's logbooks and people that have a family connection or a personal connection to the aircraft type, and even sometimes this one specifically is rewarding.
These aircraft were built for reconnaissance for World War II, as well as sub-hunting. Later on, after the war, there was a surplus of these aircraft, and they ended up being converted to freight hauling, but most of them became water bombers. Somebody had the vision of putting a water bomb system in it and scooping water with them and fighting forest fire, and they became water bombers all across Canada and into the United States a bit. As you can see, the way the nose door and the landing gear are, it's an amphibious aircraft, which means it's equally as comfortable on land as it is on water. By pulling the gear up, the nose doors close, the wheels fold up alongside the fuselage, and it becomes basically a flying boat. So that's what it does is when it's firefighting, it scoops water, it lands on the water, runs across the surface of the water, forces water up into the two water tanks, which are 400 imperial gallons each for a total of 800 gallons. And it, once loaded, the probes come up and off the water you go and to the forest fire to drop on the fire. So it's powered by two Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines that develop 1,200 horsepower each. And again, the engines are built in Canada by Pratt & Whitney. So Canada has a pretty big name aviation-wise around the world because of these types of airplanes that were built in this aircraft in 1943. And they've flown various countries all over the world. Wings, of course, you can see the size of it. It's got 104 feet of wingspan, which gives it an excessive amount of lift. It has huge fuel tanks in it, two main tanks, one for the left engine, one for the right engine, and it will basically at long-range cruise, it will stay airborne for almost 24 hours. Of course, when you're water bombing with it, we only would take fuel usually for about 4 or 5 hours of water bombing, but for ferrying long-range cruise, it's good for about 24 hours. One of the unique features too is the fact is that on the wingtip, it's got the sponsons which are fold up into the wing, which help develop lift. The only time they come into play is if you do a full stop on the water. You lower those and it keeps the aircraft upright. Otherwise, without them, the aircraft would want to tip over. So it keeps the airplane upright when it's stationary in the water. The aircraft, which is different than a lot of modern aircraft today, is it has no flaps, which again, I guess because of the size of the wing, the thickness of the wing and the amount of lift it can generate, it didn't have a need for wings. And again, in 1930s technology, they didn't have access to a lot of the technology that they have today as far as designing and building aircraft. So it's pretty amazing the aircraft can do, considering it was designed in the 1930s. We can have a look at the under the hull. is the water door. There's two water doors, one for each tank. The doors are closed right now, but you can see them under there, and they actually are at the bottom of the water tanks. So what happens when the tanks are full from the cockpit, you push the bomb button and the doors just free fall open, and the water exits. When it's empty, then the doors are hydraulically closed again, and back to the lake you go for another load of water. Yeah, it's you know, it's a big aircraft, but of course it carries 8,000 pounds, so you need the size of an aircraft to carry that kind of weight. You know, its original design, of course, was to go across the ocean. You know, it was hunting submarines, stayed airborne for long periods of time, doing you know, search and rescue for downed airmen or ships that have been sank and stuff, as well as sub hunting and aerial surveys looking for ships and submarines. Really, back in the day, of course, in World War II, where the holes are in the fuselage, there would have been 50 caliber machine guns. Under the wing, there's a detachment where they used to carry the torpedo racks and stuff. The back end, there used to be, they had, back was an opening for a 50 caliber gun as well. That's been, you know, closed up over the years, and of course, all the stuff where the guns and armament and all that sort of stuff has all been removed. We can go over here and I'll show you the probe, which is the white probe in underneath here. That probe, the L-shaped scoop, it's lowered from the cockpit and held down with hydraulic pressure. And that's lowered before you go into the water. And as you go into the water, you touch the water, you go full power on the engines, and you just wait, and it takes about 14 seconds to fill up the water. And then once the tanks are full, it's just a switch, which is their hydraulically operated probe. So up they come, and then back into the air go.
This aircraft is 81 years old, and it still flies because it was looked after, and the generosity of people to help us and provide pieces, information for maintenance. And
to pilots and engineers, airplanes are almost like living things. And the fact that this airplane had a life, and a life again, and a life again, and then it's in the bushes sitting there doing nothing, means something to an aircraft engineer. And my brother did something about it.